Good afternoon. Welcome to this meeting of the Merton and Sutton Joint Cemetery Board. If I could start the meeting with nominations for chair. Thank you. That's agreed. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you. The next item of business is to elect a vice chair. It should be a Sutton councillor. Would somebody like to nominate a Sutton councillor to be the vice chair for the next municipal year? Thank you. Because you're masked up, I'm not masking while I'm speaking, which probably means I won't bother, but as there's nobody near me. But Councillor Bokhari from Merton indicated this was her first meeting, so welcome to that. Also recently become a GLA member on the list system, the Lib Dems. Would be just a good idea if we just sort of say who we are so that everybody knows underneath the mask who it is. I think that's Zoe there, isn't it? So, Zoe, could you just say who you are and what you do here, sort of thing?
I'm Zoe Church. I'm Treasurer to the board.
Hi, I'm John Bolsley. I'm the Assistant Director of Public Space.
Hello, thank you very much for that introduction, Councillor Bokhari for West Barnes and Merton, and yeah, also newly elected London Assembly member.
I'm Councillor Drew Heffernan from Sutton, and I represent Worcester Park Ward.
Good afternoon. I'm Councillor Steve Cook from Sutton, and I represent Wallington South Ward.
Hello, I'm Councillor Annie Morale, and I represent St Helier Ward.
I'm Councillor Nick Draper from Merton. I also represent St Helier Ward, but a different one.
Cemeteries Manager.
I'm Councillor Agatha Akyigyina, and I represent Figs Marsh Ward.
I'm David Williams, Merton councillor representing Hillside. Okay, well, thank you for that. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Apologies from Councillor Alan Bretis and from, on the officers' side, Howard Joy.
Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Looking around. There are none. Minutes of the previous meeting to be found on pages 1 to 4. Can those be agreed as a correct record? Thank you, Councillor Draper. Seconded. Thank you very much, Councillor Cook. Annual governance statement. Zoe, are you going to take us through that?
Trying to think of, oh, that was easy, it just came on. So I'm going to keep my commentary very short and sweet. Sorry, yeah. I'm going to keep my commentary as succinct as possible. Very much Merton is required to compile an annual governance statement each year. Very much Merton and Sutton Joint Cemetery Board draws on the works of the London Borough of Merton in all the systems and procedures that they have in place. And in certain respects, it draws on the systems and procedures that Sutton have in place with regard to...
Sorry, I'm having real trouble. If you could get closer, that'd be great.
With regard to their councillors. So very much you'll see how everything dovetails together. So we as much as possible, try and compile with the Solace framework, which has developed 7 principles, which is shown on page 7. And each year we review how we've actually performed against those key principles. So the appendix sets out how Merton and Sutton Joint Cemetery Board has actually delivered meeting the annual government statement. And all that is set out very concisely. Paragraphs 2.4 and 3.2 shown on pages 10 and 11 deal with principle 7. So that's not highlighted separately, but the response is actually included within those 2 paragraphs. And then at the very back of the report on page 14 under section 9 is the work that will be carried out in this coming year.
Thank you, Zoe. Are there any questions? We're only asked to note and agree, but are there any questions? Then can I take it that we note and agree the governance statement? Very well, thank you. Next is the abstract of accounts. So back to Zoe, this is page 15.
Okay. And again, this is an annual report to the board. Here there are 5 recommendations to approve the set of accounts, to approve the annual audit return, which will require signing off, hence the requirement for physical attendance at the meeting. We're also revising the estimates for this year's activity that was set back in February, and asking the board to reconsider whether to increase the possible drawdown from reserves from £800,000 to £1 million, and then finally to agree the risk register, which is shown as Appendix J. In a nutshell, this year's activity, there's been quite a large underspend compared to the budget. This is mainly due to 2 reasons: the delivery of the special projects programme and additional income being achieved. So the cause of the additional income is obviously linked in some way, shape or form to the impact of COVID, but this has also delayed the delivery of the special projects programme. So if I quickly talk you through the accounts. So debtors and creditors, as you can see, currently there are 3 years worth of estimated income share outstanding with ID Verdi. That work continues on. Hopefully we will be getting the first 2 years finalised quite soon. Fund balances are now well over £1 million. And that leads directly then into the impact on the revised estimates, which is shown, can't get there, on page 37 of your papers. So as you can see here, we are being quite prudent still in our forecast income outturn, in that we are just assuming that we will hit the threshold. But we have increased the special projects programme by £95,000 for new bearer beams and replacement bearer beams, and that's covered elsewhere on the agenda today. Then at Appendix J, we have the updated risk register with one new risk added, which is 2A, which is shown at the bottom of page 38. And then the final item that I wanted to draw your attention to is then back on page 16, which is then increasing the possible drawdown by the constituent authorities of Merton and Sutton to a possibility of up to £1 million. So whereas the cemetery has fared very well under COVID, I think all councillors are well aware of the pressures that both councils have been under because of COVID.
Well, thank you, Zoe, for that. Perhaps it would be logical just to take questions arising on each recommendation. So the draft abstract of accounts, are there any questions on that? No. The annual audit return, Appendix E. No. The approval of the revised revenue estimates for the current year, 21-22, in Appendix I. I'm going to skip D for the moment. Risk register, are there any questions on the risk register at Appendix J? Councillor Bokhari.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that you said that on this page 38, it says that initially there's been an increase in income at the cemetery due to increased demand, but then that you've also referred to a lack of installation of bearer beams has the potential to negatively impact available grave capacity. Is there an issue with funding to get the beams in place? That's what I'm just wondering. There's no issue there with the funding, okay.
So as you can see, that's why we've added, oh, sorry. Yes, sorry. There is no issue with funding. The issue is actually with delivery, hence the money being added to this year's budgets so that the programme can catch up.
Thank you. This is just a really quick one on the risk of a pandemic. Obviously, we've just been through one and hopefully seen the tail end of it. Do we expect are we making any changes to the likelihood of a pandemic in the future in terms of our risk register, or are we happy that with where it is at the moment on the matrix?
Chair, if I could address that point. In terms of the operational aspects of considering future pandemics within the risk register, I think that's something that we shall be reviewing for the next stage. We currently are within our business continuity planning at this stage and reviewing that for the winter season. So we will look at any future impacts that may have on the risk register. It can be a high level risk that sits there more strategically for the longer term. Thank you.
Councillor Heffernan, are you content with that answer? Thank you. Then I'm going to go to recommendation D. Those of us with long memories will recall that we had a bit of a debate that as we accumulated considerable reserves, that maybe in due proportion, and that's set out for us, that we might return some of those funds to, sorry, I'm looking at page 16, paragraph 2.4, that we might return either, well, last year we were talking about 800,000, and you can see how that would be dished out to each of the two boroughs, or £1 million. And the increase suggestion to 1 million is because the surplus that we have just noted in the previous year. I've got a question, perhaps so I put from the chair. I still not quite understand the sundry debtors. So I diverted in the guaranteed income. It seems to me that a substantial part of our reserves is money that has not yet actually been paid over into our bank account, as it were. So although it looks as though we've got a decent surplus still, even if we gave £1 million away, actually we don't have that 371,000 in our pockets. Am I right in that, or am I wrong?
I'm not sure that I'm actually comfortable having that discussion with the contractor sitting in the room.
I'm sorry, that is something that should have been mentioned before. Mark, would you mind just stepping out into the sort of cafe area out there? And we'll come and grab you in a moment. Thank you very much. Sorry, I hadn't thought of that dimension. Okay, maybe not everybody can hear this, but the clerk and Ms. Church are suggesting that if we shouldn't be having this discussion in front of the contractor, as this is live streamed, we maybe ought to have that discussion in private. So if you are in agreement, I'm going to put consideration and voting on this item back to the end of the meeting. I think, though, it would be perfectly in order to say that we could vote on the other recommendations in the public sector section, sorry, which is to say that we agree with all of the other aspects of this, including the risk register, sorry, page 15. So recommendations A, B, C, and E, which we had no questions on, are we content to agree those items? I'm seeing nods all around and a couple of hands up, so nobody against? No. All right, so all those recommendations are accepted, and we will return in private to discuss agenda item 6D. Our clerk has just gone to get the contractor back. Mark, I'm sorry about that. We suddenly realised anyway that it was live streamed and you could be watching it comfortably in the cafe. So we're going to have to deal with that item in private session once we turn off the live stream. However, the next item on our agenda is agenda item 7, which is indeed the contractor report. John, are you going to say anything on this, or is it something you want Mark to lead on?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Robinson, on behalf of ID Verde, will go through the contractor report. Thank you.
Okay. The report covers that grounds maintenance
I'm
modifications.
sorry, could you speak directly into the microphone? I'd be grateful, thank you.
So the report covers from activities from January 21 to June now. Covers the grounds maintenance modifications to working practices for COVID, the bins, health and safety with moral testing, the replacement beams, we're working with the client, roads and footpaths, again, working with the client, the burial numbers, which are in Appendix A, shows we did have an increase in burial numbers in March, which reflected on the income. Complaints, and there's not been that many complaints, there's quite a few compliments, especially from the Muslim community, dealing with all their extra burials on time. And then the other thing is the risk management, where we had an IT issue with it's called phishing emails. We get loads of phishing emails daily, and apparently so many got through, and they decided to close down the server. So we were stuck for 2 weeks, but now luckily we kept all our paperwork, and we were paper-based, so nothing affected the running of the cemetery. And now we're up and running again with all the IT. That's basic. Has anyone got any questions?
So any questions to Mr. Robinson on his report? Yes, Councillor Moran.
I didn't quite hear you with the breach, with the IT breach.
Oh, sorry. So it's called, I'm not sure, it's called phishing. You get various phishing emails daily, and which have viruses on them. And normally the server stops them coming through, but one got through and somebody opened a new email, which then attacked the server. So they closed everything down for 2 weeks. But luckily we're all up and running again. But it didn't affect the cemetery service.
Thank you, Chair. Could you tell me when the burial beams are going to start? You're going to start implementing?
We're working with the clients and facilities management on that, and so with the money. So, John, have you got any ideas?
Thank you, Chair. I will be addressing the burial beam program within the client side report. Thank you.
Content to wait till then. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, it's back to the phishing attack. I do. You know, we sympathise. We all have to do online training for this. Are all the staff now online trained and aware of what exactly it entails? I mean, given what happened.
Is or
do they have they now received the same training as everybody else as to not accept phishing? We have this thing called purple fish, which is really annoying, but it teaches you not to open things.
we haven't had verbal fish, but all our PCs have been scanned, and we've had new systems and new ways of getting into the Citrix server, new passwords, and a lot of our PCs are going to be changed to Windows 10.
Yeah, I'm thinking more about the individuals rather than the server itself. You know, because any system can go wrong if we as humans let it do so. That's all. It's only good as far as the
I
operation.
don't really know, to be honest.
Okay, it doesn't matter. As long as you find out, that's all right.
Chair, may I address this point? In terms of Section 10 within this report, this event happened across all of ID Verdi's infrastructure. So it was a nationwide event. It didn't occur locally, but it did impact local services. So this was not an issue of a local concern. However, within the detail of the report, they took a very risk-based approach in respect to that and secured all of their IT infrastructure nationally and had to rebuild it from saved profiles, and in order to prevent any transfer of protected data. I think what's an assurance here is that there wasn't any breaches locally, and we have restored systems locally, and there was a reliance on tried and tested paper-based methods which allowed the service to continue. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for your report. I am new to this committee, as you know, and one of the reasons I wanted to get involved with this was that I'd been receiving a few emails from the Muslim residents in Merton, not just in my ward, but outside of my ward. And one of the concerns that they've had is because of the maintenance of their graveyards, particularly when the soil starts to sink down. Is that part of the maintenance that you should be providing, ID Verde topping up the soil to make sure that it's level? Because it's obviously your job is, it does involve a lot of emotions. The clients and the customers that you're dealing with will be, particularly emotional at the moment, and visiting their relatives and seeing the state of their graves is obviously really upsetting, and those are the kind of emails that I've been receiving recently. So does your ground maintenance cover that upkeep and making sure that the ground is level?
Yeah, so the ground, when a grave is used, we leave it to settle for a year, but we keep, basically at the end of the funeral, it's mounded up, and then it sinks over the year. But during the year, we mound it up again. Then after the year, we kind of level it, and then we seed it. But when you have, problem is, Merton, it's really heavy London clay. So as soon as it rains, it just drops. It can drop about 2 or 3 feet quite easily overnight. Then we have to top them up again. But it's not just the Muslim section, it's the other sections as well. So when it rains heavily, all sections, all new graves have sunk, so they have to go around topping them all up. But that is part of the maintenance program.
I hope you don't mind, but could I forward you one particular person who's very upset right now, whose grave has not been attended to, and ID Verde have not responded to his pleas? So is that something that you wouldn't mind dealing with?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions to Mr. Robinson? No. Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for your contribution there. So, Mr. Mosley, we're moving on to the next agenda item 8, which is the client side report.
Thank you very much. In terms of this report, the main priorities within here in the recommendations are to provide, firstly, to note the positive work that the Cemeteries team through ID Verde and all the officers involved have continued to put into the service during this pandemic period. It's been very difficult. It has expanded its breadth across our services in terms of additional staff being trained to help support this service. And I just wanted to offer my extreme appreciation for their endeavors during this period. And then we have outlined within the report the proposed program for our Capital Works program, which will address various facets of work that needs to continue within the Merton and Sutton cemetery site in order to ensure its effective running over the longer course, as well as the program of rectification for the headstones with specific reference to Site M or Section M within the site, and the restoration of those memorials that failed the safety testing program. Firstly, within the proposed program for 2021-22, that is best indicated in Table 1, which is in 2.2.3 within the report, which outlines the work that we propose to do with the installation of new bearer beams, which will allow us to have effective grave space to ensure capacity in the future. The replacement of bearer beams which have failed. So these are older bearer beams which, through soil upheaval over time, degradation of the material have failed and need to be replaced, as well as the memorial program and the refurbishment of memorials on the site, as well as ancillary works that will occur to the roads and footpaths at the site. I would recommend that those works are supported, as they will ensure the integrity of the site. And then within the table 2, we have provided a Gantt chart, a schedule for these works to give some further confidence to the committee and how we propose to approach these works so that they can be undertaken within this operational year, financial year. And then lastly, the memorial safety testing program. Figure 3 within the report on page 51 is some work that we have done since January in terms of finding a suitable alternative, which isn't reliant on the replacement of bearer beams, to support the repair of failed memorials that were associated with, in particular, Section M, but other failed areas due to the memorial safety testing program. So we have spoken to the service sector and come up with a proposed reinstatement option, which allows us to effectively dow and support the memorials independently. And it is a cost-effective method, but it's also within keeping of the site. And I think has allowed us to also have an effective means to recommence the memorial safety testing program, because we have a very good option in terms of rectifying any failed memorials that may occur during that testing period. So I'd like to recommend those recommendations. Thank you very much, Chair.
I'm just going to open for general questions to Mr. Bosley on the report and recommendations. Well, I will take each of the recommendations separately. Councillor Bokhari.
Sorry, for a newbie, I'm asking lots of things, but not surprising. I think the work that everyone's put in during the pandemic has been absolutely commendable, and so I just wanted to note that, please. As well as that, I'd like to mention some of the works that you've talked about in Section M, particularly as I've already mentioned, I've had contact with Muslim residents in the area about how this is going to take place. I've noted in Section 224 about the programme of work, in Section BX and KX, about the bearer beam installation. I'm glad to hear that there is sufficient funding for that. And I also note in Section 249 about the communication being vital and very important to ensure that there's a 6-week programme to be supported by stakeholders. Now, what I'd be really keen to see and hear about is what kind of communication there will be. I've had complaints from residents who are very, very upset about the way this was managed, where they saw members of ID Verde or from the cemetery task force or whatever, you know, they were using their legs and feet to push down gravestones. You may shake your head, but that is what I was told. And that was very upsetting to see. Just some clarification and some communication to make sure that everyone knows exactly what's happening, particularly in the Muslim community, because there is a rise of Islamophobia, and graveyards is one of those places that are targeted mostly. So we need to make sure that it's done in a very sensitive way and that the communication is very clear. The signage before wasn't clear. There was a few little signs here and around in the graveyard, but it wasn't obvious, so people really had to find out where they were. So we need to make sure that communication isn't just a sign or a poster. It needs to be actually communicated directly to mosques and community groups who are going to be dealing with the repercussions of anything that might go wrong or is mishandled or is upsetting for any of the residents.
I think that sounded more like a comment than a question.
Yeah,
Not
sorry about
no,
that.
No,
I did just want to make
no,
that
a,
as a note.
a comment is fine, but right, Councillor Draper.
Thanks. Sorry. This is a genuine question. Again, it relates to the headstones that were made safe, particularly within the Muslim community. I see that the section M says that it emanated from an eroded bearer beam, and that accounts for all 115. Is that the same issue affecting the MU area? That's a different issue, but because again, there's a disproportionately high number of headstones. I mean, obviously, what Councillor Bokhari has just said is very important, but the most important thing is making sure it doesn't happen in the first place. If there are any kind of procedural things to do with how a stone is placed in the first place, it'd be very, very helpful to actually have that around. Are there any instructions being given to the Muslim community in that respect?
Sorry, I'm looking to Mr. Bosley first.
Thank you very much, Chair. In respect to the memorial safety testing program, I believe the commencement for the program was in section B, if I was not mistaken. What happened is we were developing that memorial safety testing program. We had isolated incidents where through the grave owner who engages with a memorial contractor to install this, they weren't installed effectively, and we had some failures where the headstones needed to be made safe. Then we came to the sections, the larger sections where we have higher numbers, as in table 3 under section 2.3.5. Those areas are more associated with the infrastructure being the bearer beams, which have failed. At that time, when we encountered that period, we suspended all memorial safety testing because I didn't feel confident that we had a system in place and able to deal with those numbers, and also we didn't have a robust system in place to rectify those memorials post that point without the rectification of the bearer beam in itself. The new proposed reinstatement method of laid down memorials in figure 3 allows us and affords us an alternative option in order to both make safe but also quickly repair any memorials that need to be rectified due to issues either with the bearer beam or their primary installation in the first place. In terms of responding to the grave owners, we will be writing to the grave owners. We will give them we've been discussing it last week in terms of the process in which we will undertake to do that. And we will have this over a 3-month period. At the end of that 3-month period, we will need to make a decision to rectify that memorial at our cost, because that is kind of the defined period which I find acceptable to have a memorial made safe. Past that point, due to respect for the burial site, we need to make that memorial safe, so we will have to undertake that at cost. But during that stage, we will be engaging with the grave owner in respect to any memorials that we find unsafe, because it's still their responsibility in terms of making those memorials safe that were installed incorrectly. Hopefully that answers your query. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Going forward, how are you going to make sure that the headstone owners who are going to place the headstones and are going to do a proper job and you know that it's secure, are the families going to make sure it's secure, or are you going to make sure that it's secure? Because if it's not going to be secure, it's going to happen again. You know, people, when you have a headstone put down, you don't automatically think you have to go and shake it or, you know, or check it out. So how are you going to make sure that it's safe?
Thank you, Chair. And in respect to that, Mr. Robinson through ID Verde look at the independent contractors who come on site for the installation of memorials. So he ensures that they are certified and able and competent to do that work. What we'll be doing is, you know, checking on the work post installation to ensure that they are done effectively in order to make sure that the memorial has been installed in a safe and proper manner. Thank you.
I don't see any more questions, and each of these recommendations are simply to note. So are these duly noted? Thank you very much, Mr. Bursley. Oh, yes, Councillor Draper.
Chair, all I was going to say, this is the statement rather than that, is that, you know, we know that the burial service has been going through a very difficult time over the last, is it 15, 18 months? Whatever, you know, it's a long time. And I just think that we should actually record our thanks to the workers for what they have done at a very, very difficult time.
Sure, we would all agree. Is that agreed? We note that. Thank you very much. So that brings us to the end of the public agenda. We need to return in private session to discuss the financial position of the board and whether or not we return 800,000 or £1 million to the two boroughs. We can't do that in public because there are elements of commercial consideration that we have to talk about. So I'm going to conclude the public meeting at this point and